Sapadavachakacharya Stotra Sutashi Mata's Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBD Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Padavachakacharya Stotra Sutashi Mata's Divine Grace. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Shlahadadas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Mahadani Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtana Ki Jai. Brihat Madanga Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 12, text number 4. Sanakam cha sanandam cha. Sanakam cha sanandam cha. Sanatanam atatmabhi Sanatmanam atatmabu. Sanat Kumaram Chamunim. Sanat Kumaram Chamunim. Niskriyan Urvareta Saha. Niskriyan Urvareta Saha. Sanakam cha sanandam cha. Sanatmanam atatmabu. Sanat Kumaram Chamunim. Niskriyan Urdvareta Saha. Sanakam cha sanandam cha. Ahatmavu. Vaishnavis? Sanakam, Sanak, Cha, also, Sanandam, Sananda, Cha, and Sanatanam, Sanatan, Ata, thereafter, Atmabu, Brahma, who is self-born, Sanat Kumaram, Sanat Kumar, Cha, also, Munim, the great sages, Niskriyan, free from all fruit of action, Urdhvaretasa, those whose semen flows upwards. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. In the beginning, Brahma created 4 great sages named Sanak, Sanandana, Sanat, and Sanat Kumar. All of them were unwilling to adopt materialistic activities because they were highly elevated due to their semen flowing upwards. Purport. Although Brahma created the principles of nescience as a matter of necessity for those living entities who were destined to ignorance by the will of the Lord, he was not satisfied in performing such a thankless task. He therefore created 4 principles of knowledge: Sankhya, or empiric philosophical philosophy for the analytical study of material conditions; Yoga, or mysticism for liberation of the pure soul from material bondage; Vairagya, the acceptance of complete detachment from material enjoyment in life to elevate oneself to the highest spiritual understanding; and Tapas, or the various kinds of voluntary austerities performed for spiritual perfection. Brahma created these 4 great sages, Sanak, Sanandana, Sanatan, and Sanat, to entrust them with these 4 principles of spiritual advancement. And they inaugurated their own spiritual party, or sampradaya, known as the Kumara Sampradaya, or later on as the Nimbaka Sampradaya, for the advancement of bhakti. All of these great sages became great devotees, for without devotional service to the personality of Godhead, one cannot achieve success in any activity of spiritual value. Om Aganatamiram Dasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakaramayam Dadati Swaparantikam. So Lord Brahma was feeling, as it says here, he was feeling bad. He was not satisfied in performing such a thankless task, and therefore he created these 4 principles of knowledge: Sankhya, Yoga, Vairagya, and Tapas. So those are, as mentioned here, they're 4 principles of knowledge, and as mentioned in the purport, they're meant to they're 4 principles of so there are 4 principles of knowledge, and later in the purport, Prabhupada refers to them as 4 principles of spiritual advancement. So they're important, but they are not in and of themselves devotional service. See? Those you could be performing tapasya, vairagya, yoga, and sankhya, and not be a devotee. See, it's not that those things are in and of themselves devotional service. They are different from devotional service. They can be helpful in achieving, elevating oneself to the platform of devotional service, but they are not in and of themselves devotional service. Just to support that statement, I'm going to read something from the Nectar Devotion, chapter 14, titled Devotional Qualifications, where Prabhupada basically makes this point. He says, some scholars recommend that knowledge and renunciation are important factors for elevating oneself to devotional service. But actually, this is not a fact. Actually, the cultivation of knowledge and renunciation, which are favorable for achieving a footing in Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada does give it that much credit. He says they are favorable for achieving a footing in Krishna consciousness, may be accepted in the beginning, but ultimately they may also come to be rejected. For devotional service is dependent on nothing other than the sentiment or desire for such service. It requires nothing more than sincerity. It is the opinion of expert devotees that mental speculation and the artificial austerities of yoga practice may be favorable for becoming liberated from material contamination. See, so they're not bogus. I mean, they're there. It's pointed out here in today's purport. They are principles of spiritual advancement. But it goes on to say, in this Nectar Devotion purport, it says, and they may be helpful, favorable for becoming liberated from material contamination, but they will also make one's heart harder and harder. They will not help at all in the progress of devotional service. These processes are therefore not favorable for entering into the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Actually, Krishna consciousness, devotional service itself, is the only way of advancing in devotional service. It goes on. So, yeah, that's an important point to understand, I think, here, that what's required for devotional service, these things can be used in devotional service, but ultimately what's required is, as Prabhupada says here, nothing other than the sentiment or desire for such service. It requires nothing more than sincerity. So my understanding of where these things come into the picture is that if somebody has that, they have the sincere desire for devotional service, then Krishna will reveal to them how they can make use of these four principles of knowledge, and everything else for that matter, to advance in devotional service. And that's stated in the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pratipurvakam dadami buddhiyogam tam yena mama upayantite. Krishna says, to those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, sincerely, they have, like I said here, the sincere sentiment, desire for devotional service, I give them the intelligence, how they can come to me. I give them the intelligence, how they can use Sankhya, Yoga, Vairagya, Tapas to advance in Krishna consciousness. Another place where basically Krishna says the same thing, makes the same point. 9:22, he says, Ananyas chintayantamam yejanam pariupashate tesham nityabhayuktanam yoga shemam vahamiyaham. That somebody who's absorbed in meditating on my transcendental form, I preserve what they have, and I carry what they lack. See? So in other words, it's kind of a universal spiritual principle. Even in the Bible, there's a verse that says, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all things will be added unto you. See? So the idea is that Krishna reciprocates with devotees. He reciprocates with people who are trying to surrender to him and get closer to him. Right? And he's capable of doing that. Whereas a material process is not capable of reciprocation. I'll give you an example of what I mean. I was listening to a lecture Prabhupada gave in 1966, lecture on the Bhagavad Gita, and where he's making a distinction between separated energy and connected energy, or spiritual energy. So he says, these 8 elements are described in the Bhagavad Gita as separated energy. Separated energy, you'll understand. He says, just like I'm speaking, and my speech is being recorded in this tape recorder. So I am not here. If you apply the machine, it will exactly speak like me. That is my energy. But now it is separated. Here's the point. It cannot be changed. See, when you listen to a Prabhupada lecture or anything material, it's operating according to a certain law, a certain rule, and it'll do that every time. Fire will burn you every time. Freezing water will make you cold every time, like that. Because why? Because it's a machine. You see, it's just set up like that. Prabhupada says it cannot change. Machines. Yeah, it cannot change. Suppose I am personally sitting here. If I want to speak something, I can change into another. But that machine cannot change. It will simply produce the sound, what is recorded there. Therefore, it is separated energy. So that's the difference between, at least I think I have a little bit more on that. He says, similarly, these 8 elements, they are called separated energy. They're created from God's inconceivable potencies. The energy has come out, and it is acting mechanically, just like the same way, tape recorder. He gives the same example again. No one has got the power to change it, but it is working. It is working, and it is working nicely because it is emanated from the absolute truth. It is appearing just like the truth. So the idea is that spiritual energy it's alive. It can respond. Whereas material, if you talk to the tape recorder, say you're listening to a Prabhupada lecture, okay, for instance, and you're really getting inspired, or you have a question, and you ask, you're hearing Prabhupada's voice, you ask a question, you're not going to get an answer. At least you're not going to get an answer from that tape recorder. But if Prabhupada was sitting there, and you asked a question, you get an answer. See, so the point is that Krishna can reciprocate with his devotees. When Krishna understands that a devotee's sincere in devotional service, Krishna reciprocates. He can reciprocate through the deities. He can reciprocate, by giving you realizations by chanting the holy name, Atakshri Krishna Namadi, Nabhaved Gurayam Indade, Sevan Mukhe Hi Jivado, Swayame Visparatya, that Krishna can't be understood by the blunt material senses, but when one engages in devotional service, beginning with the tongue, beginning with chanting, taking prasadam, then Swayame Visparatya, that Krishna reveals himself. So Krishna, it's a reciprocation. Krishna reveals himself to his devotees, right? So that's how these 4 principles can be made use of. It says here, all these sages became great devotees, for without devotional service to the personality of Godhead, one cannot achieve success in any activity of spiritual value. So Prabhupada's acknowledging, once again, that these activities have spiritual value, but that you have to be a devotee. You see? Without devotional service, one cannot achieve success in any activity of spiritual value. It's like Prabhupada once gave an example, I think it was here in Los Angeles. He said if you have zeros, you could have a whole lot of zeros. Say you have 10 zeros, and let's add up 10 zeros. What is 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0? 0. We should ask Abai that question. I think that was one he could handle. But it's 0, okay? But if you put a 1 in front of those zeros, then it becomes 10, 100,000, like that, you see. So it's like that. When you add Krishna to the picture, all of a sudden these things take on value. Your yoga, your vairagya, your tapas, your sankhya, all the other, and everything else. It all takes on value when Krishna's in the picture. When there's devotional service, then you can achieve success in any activity of spiritual value. All those things will be, you'll be able to use them properly to advance in devotional service. So. Okay, now, so I feel like I had a little realization of this yesterday, and you might think, I'll tell you, it's like I'll describe it in an anecdotal way because it is like a story, and if you don't feel it's too sentimental, hang in there, I'll give a more philosophical explanation following it. So, recently I've been do a little shopping. I do some shopping for the deities. I buy some milk, and I was buying some other things for some other devotees because I've got one of those EBT cards. Okay, so I'm trying to use it in Krishna's service. And so, I was doing the shopping and buying the different things. And while I was doing that, I noticed some, ginger, organic ginger sitting there on the organic fruit lane. And I just thought, oh, I should get that, you know? And then I got it because I had a cold. I'm perfectly okay now, but I had a cold, and I thought, well, ginger's supposed to be good. Archie just sent me a text message when I told him I had a cold. He said, ginger and rest. So I got the ginger, and then I thought to myself, well, it's so hard to eat ginger. It's so kind of like, it's hard to get it down, you know. It's really hot. And I thought, well, maybe I'll cover it with, but if I took some honey as well, that could work. And I looked it up on the internet, and sure enough, ginger and honey was a good combination. So when I got home, first thing I did was I offered the ginger, and I took it, and I took the piece of ginger, and I dipped it in a little honey cup. I had a cup, poured some honey in a cup, and I dipped the ginger in the honey, and I just ate it, and I chewed it, and the skin, you know, the skin. I didn't peel the skin, but that you know, I could tell when I got through all the ginger, and I was just left with the skin, so I just spit that out and threw it. Anyway, it worked like magic. It worked like magic. I could immediately feel like, I could breathe again, you know, and I could feel it, you know, just help. And I did it like 2 or 3 times. So I really felt that Krishna, this was my interpretation. I felt like, wow, Krishna, this is a reciprocation from Krishna, because I'm out here trying to serve the deities, trying to serve devotees. Krishna gave me the intelligence to see how I could do something good for myself. I felt like Krishna, he didn't have to. You know, I mean, I could have just saw it and just, but no, I really believe that Krishna gave me the intelligence to grab onto that and do that, and it worked. And now I'm going to make that a regular part of my health regime, because it's very good stuff, ginger. Prabhupada, actually just a little sideline, Prabhupada used to have devotees slice the ginger for him every meal, and he'd have them soak it in lemon juice. And according to Harisari in the Transcendental Diary, Prabhupada wouldn't take his prasadam if the ginger wasn't there. That's how much Prabhupada, you know, thought the ginger was important for his digestion. So it's has a great medicinal value. Anyway, so as I said, you might think that's a little bit sentimental. I don't know. Maybe it is. But here's a more philosophical explanation of how Krishna reciprocates with his devotees. So in a 1966 lecture, Prabhupada said this. He said, if I don't believe in God, but I must believe some power beyond me, which is controlling me every step. Prabhupada goes, either call it God or anything, nature. But there is a controlling power. You have to admit. How can you deny it? Therefore, anyone who denies the existence of controlling power, he is a foolish man. He is not very intelligent. No intelligent man will deny. And that's almost like a statement you can't argue with. How can you argue with that? We're being controlled, you know? I mean, Abai is 8. Can he stop himself from becoming 9? No. Right? You know, we can't stop ourselves from getting old, or we can't stop ourselves from, if somebody, you know, from getting cold, if we're out in the freezing cold, et cetera, et cetera. We're being controlled in so many different ways. And any sane person, does Prabhupada use the word sane there? What does he use? Anybody who's not foolish will acknowledge that. Okay, so here's the next step. Okay, so that's step 1. You acknowledge that, yeah, I'm not in control, I'm being controlled. And the next step is this. Okay, next step, where are you? Thank you, Krishna. Okay, here's the next step. Prabhupada's taking us from the acknowledging that there's a controlling power to provisionally accepting that there's God and that God is Krishna. And here it comes. This is once again an excerpt from a lecture, a 1966 lecture. Prabhupada says, how can we recognize God? He's raising the question. Okay. Then he says, some supernatural power evidence of authorities, scriptural evidence, these things are required. Okay? So far Krishna is concerned, every authority has accepted him as God. When he says that, he's referring to acharyas. Okay? And when he was present, his activities were superhuman. And from the evidence of Vedic literature, he is God. So the Vedic literatures, the acharyas, and etc. They all. Prabhupada says, then in spite of all these evidences, if you do not believe him, then it must be considered that asuram bhavam, that, quote, I shall not believe whatever evidence you give, and whatever I mean to say, activities he may show, I shall never believe you, God. Finished. Prabhupada's saying how they're thinking. So then he goes, that is helpless. He says, then that is helpless. So, avajananti mamudha manusim tanamashrita. So basically, they're a lost cause. If somebody, after coming in contact with, the whole Vedic presentation of hearing the acharyas, the conclusions of the acharyas, the scriptural evidence, and hearing the descriptions of Krishna's activities, if they're not inclined, if not prepared at that point to at least have some provisional faith, not implicit faith at that point, but provisional faith, then unfortunately, asordam bhavmashrita, then that Prabhupada says that is helpless. See? So we acknowledge as a controller, then we come in contact with the bona fide spiritual master. He gives us information, explains the whole Vedic tradition to us, those Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. And then on the basis of that, we make the decision to have what I'm referring to as provisional faith, and I'm going to explain why now. So the very next thing Prabhupada said, this is the same lecture, just continuing on, same excerpt. He says, besides that, one must have the eyes to see God also. What does Prabhupada mean besides that? What's he referring to? He's not referring to the asuram bhavmashrita. He's referring to the people who have taken the right step, who have made the choice to have provisional faith based on Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So that's a big important first step forward, that you make that decision to have provisional faith based on Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. But then Prabhupada says, besides that, one must have the eyes to see God also. In other words, there's a difference. He's making a distinction between Gyan and Vigyan. Okay, so Gyan is the first step, and now we're going to see how we go from Gyan to Vigyan. One must have the eyes to see God also. God cannot be seen with our imperfect senses. So the whole bhakti process, bhakti yoga, is the process of purifying the senses to understand what is God, what is spirit, what is soul. It requires, and then he quotes that verse, Sarvapadi vinirmuktam tatpavartena nirmalam. And then he goes on to say, this bhakti yoga is the process of purifying. As soon as you purify your power of seeing, power of hearing, power of tasting, power of touching, we have got our senses to taste, to acquire knowledge. But if the senses are blunt, then we cannot understand what is God. Therefore, it requires a regulative principle to understand what is God. See, so in other words, even above and beyond just your provisional faith, you're accepting on the strength of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra that, yeah, okay, I'm going along with this. I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. Prabhupada's saying this is the absolute truth. Okay, I'm going with it. But then you have to go further. It says here, requires a regulative principle to understand what is God. Then Prabhupada says, that regulative principle must be undertaken. And the most easiest regulative principle is this chanting of Hare Krishna. If you regularly chant with devotion, without any offense, then this very simple process will help you to purify your senses, and you will appreciate the presence of God. And God consciousness, Krishna consciousness, will develop in you. So that's my understanding of how it works. That initially, first step, you understand that we're not in control, we're being controlled. And the next step is you accept that that controller is something more than just like a force or nature. It's not random, it's a supreme person, it's a supreme being, and that supreme being is Krishna. You accept that, and on the basis of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, and then the next step is you engage in the process of devotional service, chanting being one of the the regulative principles are the most important items. And then the result will be, as Prabhupada says here, if you regularly chant with devotion without any offense, then this very simple process will help you to purify your senses, and you will appreciate the presence of God. God consciousness, Krishna consciousness will develop in you. So that's my understanding of how the whole thing works. Well, it's Prabhupada's understanding, and I'm trying to understand what Prabhupada's saying here. That's my understanding of what Prabhupada's saying, as what the process is. So, does anybody have any question? Okay. What? Yeah, wait for it. It's coming.
Hare Krishna, Bhrgupati Prabhu, thank you very much for the wonderful nectar class. You quoted a verse about the blunt material senses. I wanted to know where that verse is from, and if you can elaborate on that verse.
Yeah, it's from Padma Purana, and Prabhupada quoted that all over the place, right? He quoted that a lot, particularly in relation to that, the point I was making, that if you engage your devotional service begins with the tongue. The tongue has two functions. One is tasting, and the other is vibrating. And Prabhupada repeatedly, starting way back from early 1966 till 1977, when he finished doing his public speaking, he repeatedly made that same point, that if you just make it a vow, and he used to almost say these exact words, make it a vow that I'm only going to vibrate what's in relation to Krishna, means chanting Hare Krishna, talking about devotional service, and I'm only going to take prasadam. I'm not going to eat anything that's not offered to Krishna. I'm not going to talk about anything that's not related to Krishna. And Prabhupada said, by this simple austerity, by these two things, by this simple austerity, Krishna will reveal himself to you. That's what he said. And I compiled a notebook, and it's about 88 pages or something like that, and it's excerpts from lectures that Prabhupada gave, where he just said that same thing over and over again in different ways, and each time was slightly different, but it was the same point over and over and over again. So it's an important point. It's an important verse. Prabhupada quoted a lot, and it's an important point. Anybody else? Anything? Atak Shri Krishna Namadi Na Bhaved Garayam Indriye Sevan Mukhe Hijivado Swayameva Sparatira. Yeah. So if nobody has any question or comment, Archita? Okay. So I'm going to read something. This is a letter that Judah Karma, and I'm glad he's not here because he might get embarrassed, but this is a letter that Judah Karma wrote to Devamrita Maharaj. And apparently I don't have the email that Devamrita Maharaj wrote to Judah Karma, but he was asking about an ideal process for descending knowledge. So it's related to the class. So this is what Judah Karma said. He said, before we speak about any particular descending path of knowledge, we should first speak about what an ideal descending path of knowledge should be like. 1, it should be coming from some supreme being who knows everything. 2, it should have been around for a long time. 3, these are the criteria, in other words. 3, it should contain epistemological information differentiating it from other paths of knowledge. So in plain, simple knowledge, I think that what that would be referring to is how, you have to hear from a liberated soul, because a conditioned soul has 4 defects. You see, so it's no point in hearing from a conditioned soul, because they have those, imperfect senses, cheating propensity, make mistakes, be an illusion like that. I think that's what that point is referring to. Number 4, it should have some system for maintaining the integrity of the knowledge transmission. 5, it should be universal in scope. 6, it should deal with every important question about the self and the universe. 7, the information given about physical reality should correspond in some way to physical reality as we know it. 8, there should be some experimental methods for verifying information about the things that may be beyond physical reality. And 9, the teachers and followers of the system should be exemplary. So those are the criterion. And then this is Judah Karma, now briefly, just one paragraph, commenting upon this. He says, so if we consider all descending paths of knowledge, we shall see that the Vedic descending path satisfies these criteria better than others. It comes from a supreme intelligent being, Krishna. It is very, very old. There is a Vedic epistemology that examines the various ways of getting knowledge and which distinguishes the descending path from other paths. There is some system for maintaining the transmission of the knowledge through time, parampara in other words, i.e. the system of Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. The Vedas are universal, not dealing with only one tribe or people. The Vedas give detailed information about the universe, the self, God, etc. The Vedic teachings about physical reality are confirmed if we look at physical reality free from the preconceptions of material science. There is a system for experimentally verifying the Vedic truths through the techniques of bhakti yoga, right? And practitioners of the system display a high degree of moral character, knowledge, and happiness. So, ta-da! Krishna consciousness. What? Juda Karma. It's Juda Karmas. Yeah. Anyway, good.
I think that's in the epistemology, when they study this, if you want to make some comparative studies and revision, in order to make a point of your statement about the belief that is in general, I don't think that that's an He said,
No, he made up these criteria.
but did he ask that question to the Advaita Swami first?
I don't know. I don't know.
Who was the one who was giving?
Devanrita Swami apparently wrote an email to Juda Karma asking him about this, and Juda Karma said, you know, here's what he thinks is a criteria for an ideal system of descending knowledge. And he gave those 9 points, and then he commented upon them, saying how Krishna consciousness best fulfills that criteria.
He said, the reason I say that because I read that criteria in other traditions too. It's coming.
Yeah, it's applicable to, it's a universal criteria, and but with Juda Karma is making the point that Krishna consciousness fulfills that criteria better than, from what he can understand, what he's aware of, any other path of descending knowledge. It applies to any tradition, any and every tradition, and he feels that we're the best product on the market, so to speak. Okay, thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.